Hello. This is a video that I'm making about the new release of Tagger 2.0, which is officially, I'm going to say officially released, right, even though it's released to myself basically on March 18th, 2023. I think today's the 16th, so a couple of days, but it's, already still released, so whatever. So I figured I would just make a video talking about some of the changes in it. I think this might end up being kind of long, depending on what I feel like talking about. So I'll try to like mark stuff out with chapters and things like that. So I'll just get into it. So it's it's invoked the same way. We'll use my Yui database here because I use that one quite a bit. It's invoked the same way, right? So if you just call Tagger and then go to your DB, then it'll just open. But here, I'll show this. Here's a little help screen. So there's some command line options now, right? I'll get to those later because those are kind of auxiliary. It's still a graphical program, for the most part. So I'll just open this up here. Here's my Yui database, right? So you might notice if you're coming from an early release, like I think prior to this is version 2.0. Prior to this, the only other version was 1.0.1.0. So it looks quite a bit different, right? So we have these panels on the side. It used to be, different, whatever. You notice that you can drag these around. These overlap, right? So the left is underneath the right. I don't know if that's really all that important. It might not be. And then there's some new keybinds here. So if you press Control Q, that hides the panel on the left. You can keep pressing that. It'll toggle it. If you press Control E, oops, don't want to do that. If you press Control E, that hides the panel on the right. Control Q, Control E, left and right. Like that, right? And then you'll see, no matter what size these are, if you hide them and then bring them back, they'll spawn back at a standard size. So if you really want to, you can just easily reset them by doing that, right? If you press Control H, that hides both of them at the same time. One thing that you should be aware of is that Control Q or Control E and Control H, they all control like different toggles. So if you hide the left panel and then hide both of them, and then unhide both of them, the left panel is still gone, right? So you have to press Control Q again for that, something minor. Okay, so now I'll kind of just walk through each little part of the UI. The UI is moved around, right? But all the different parts of it are still the same. So it's just, some of them have just moved locations. So we'll talk about what corresponds to what, right? So up here, this is your query field. So when you want to run a query, this is where you do it. So here there's a little tooltip that comes up. You want to press Shift Enter to run the query, right? It's no longer Enter. You have to press Shift Enter because Enter, this is a fully featured text box, right? So you can press Enter, you can do that, you can tab, stuff like that. Right, so I think here's what we'll do is we'll just do a query here, and then run that, press Shift Enter, and here, I'll just run that, Here's a picture of Yui. These are all pictures of Yui. Right. So I think I'll finish going through the UI, and then I'll talk about changes to the query language because it's a little bit different than before, right? But if you're familiar with the query language, then this hasn't changed. You would know that this just fetches all the files in our database, so that should still be familiar to you if you know how the query language works, right? Okay, so moving on to the next part here, here's our tag list, right? So this should be familiar to you as well. One way in which this has changed is that for our selection of files, it used to show how many times a specific descriptor was applied, right? So now it doesn't show that. It shows how many files it's applied to, right? So if you have one descriptor that's been applied, like maybe 2 or 3 times to the same file, like if you have somebody's wearing a piece of clothing, somebody's wearing a shirt and some pants, and they're both the color blue, right? And you tag both of those things as blue. Before, it would have said that, you have two blues in here, right? But since those are on the same file, now it'll just say one. So, we can belabor every explanation that we get to, so I think that probably makes a lot of sense. And then here's another thing also, here's a new thing, right? So this text field here is a filter for these tags. So if you want to see some more fine-grained detail, this accepts a pattern for meta descriptors, right? So if I see, I'm in my Yui database and I want to see what kind of characters I have tagged in here, right? So I can use the character meta descriptor, and then here are all of the characters that I have tagged in here, right? So you can do stuff like that. You can do like, what kind of clothing do I have tagged in here? If I want to see what kind of outfits do I have tagged in here that Yui wears, right? So there's all these things. So you could filter your results by that. That's just to make it a little bit easier to understand what is inside your selection. You can't search from here. So like if you say like, oh, here's this, there's no option to just say like, oh, I only want to see like Starry go around, right? But what you can do is then just drop that in here and then do that, right? So you can still drag and drop stuff, so it's still pretty easy, right? So that's not too bad. Go back here. Okay. Let's see, moving on. And you'll notice, like, if you've messed around with it, I think that these things were in the previous versions, right? So you have this thing, 1, 2, 3 versus ABC. This just filters. This affects how they're sorted, right? So in descending order of how many times a tag is used or how many files have been tagged with a certain descriptor versus descending order of, alphabetic descriptor and then ascending, right? Pretty simple. Okay. Now we can go here to view, and then we've got all of our files in here. One thing that I've changed, which was asked for, was to sort the files. I've chosen just to do this by alphabetical order, right? That's the only option that you have. So if you wanted to sort them by like date added or anything like that, Tagger doesn't store that information, so I didn't want to have to add an extra field to store like what date files were added. So I took the lazy way out and just did it by alphabetical order. So if you don't like that, I'm sorry, but at least they're sorted now. Whereas before they were just returned in whatever order they would be stored in a hash set. So there's no kind of telling how that would happen, right? Okay, and then down here, here's our text field for adding folders, right? So this works the same way. You give it a path to a file or to a folder that's relative to your database. Like for this one, if I wanted to rescan my Yui folder, right, then I would go Yui, and I know that I've got her name misspelled, right? Then I could just go here, and then this would rescan that whole folder, right, if I pressed enter. So that works the exact same. I've updated this so that it has a little kind of label that comes up when it's running, right? So if you try to add a large folder before, it would kind of just run in the background, and there wouldn't really be a way for you to know when it was finished or not. So I've changed that. While it's still running, the little text box will go away. I'll just demo that. I'll open up a new database here, and I'll demo that. I'll show that to you real quick. So here we go. Here's how you make a new database, by the way, right? So we can make a tutorial database, and if we try to open this, it does not exist, right? So before, when you did that just on a file, Tagger would just automatically create the file if it didn't exist. I thought that behavior was a little bit unsafe, so I changed that. So now if you try to open a file that doesn't exist, it'll give you a warning, right? So what you want to do is Tagger and then your database, and then just create, and then it'll make it. Now we can open it, and it's like that, right? So here's a brand new database for us. We can run a query, no files in here, right? So how about I want to add my entire pictures folder. So if we do that, this is going to take a long time, so I'll just add, I've got a folder full of things that I've gotten from Twitter. I'll do screenshots because that's a big folder. I'm trying to pick something that's big enough so that we can actually see, right? So if I load this, there we go. So now this little label comes up, right? So it's letting me know that it's adding those files, and then it'll go away when it's done, which might take a minute because that's kind of a big folder. And you know, it still adds folders recursively. So when you add that, it'll go through, it'll walk through that entire tree. So I'll just give it a minute. There we go. And now it's back. And then we can query, and all of our files are here, right? So here's a little comparison image I made a while ago. Back when that anime aired, I don't remember, a couple years ago. That was back when I was still using Windows too. Okay. And here, I'll show you one more thing while we're here. I know it's kind of hard to tell, right? Because these are all kind of transparent. But in addition to this text field, there's this little directories button down here. So if you press that, then this little section is going to come up showing you all of the directories that are inside your database. And this is a really easy way, at a glance, to just rescan a certain file that's in your database. So if you have, you know, in your anime screenshots directory, if you've recently added some files in there and you don't want to type out the path name, but you already have it in your database, and you just go here and then you click on it and it'll rescan it. Right, so it has to traverse that whole tree, so it'll add files. It doesn't tell you where you're adding them from. That was kind of an implementation detail I didn't get around to. But it'll add files, right? So it's not going to add anything because all of those files are still in here, but that just makes it easy, I think, at a glance to add stuff. So I thought that that was very handy. As soon as that's done, okay, now it'll pop back up, right? So you can add a bunch of directories at a time. So we'll just close this. We're done here. Okay, I'm gonna delete this thing. Get rid of that. Okay. Now, going back to the database that actually matters. Right. Okay, so also, before I forget, here is a little text field for running shell commands. Right, so this works the same way, I think, as before. I think this was in here before. I don't actually remember. Right, but so this will run a shell command on whatever file you're currently viewing, right? So say I want to open this in a different image viewer, so I'll do this. Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. I might sneeze right in the mic. I'll run this in the Fe image viewer, or Fe, whatever, right? And it'll open that for me, right? So this is it's all threaded, so this should just open in a new thread, and then you can still go and then do other things around here if you want. There we go. Yep. So you can do that if you want, you know, fun stuff like that. And then also, if this mass op is toggled, mass operation, I didn't know what else to call that, then that feeds your entire selection as arguments to this, right? So we can do that, and then now we can just go through all of our images like that, right? So that's our entire selection in there, so we can do that. So that's kind of handy, you know, sometimes. If you feel like, you know, like sometimes I like to make collages with all the images. This is a good way to do that. Okay, so that's it for the left side here. Here's the right side. So just like this is the query text field, this is the tag text field. So it works the same way as before, right? So it's very similar to the query one in that you press shift enter to tag a file. Here, like, we'll do this one here. So we've got Yui. This is her Lollipop Honey outfit. In case you didn't know that, now you do. She's wearing a sweater, pink. I mean, it's kind of wearing it, not quite. She's got a white top on that's formal. And also, that top, she's got a blue ribbon. She's got a necklace. And twin tail or twin tails. I don't remember what that one is called, so we can use a wildcard there, right? Side locks for her hair, right? These things, side locks. Colon capital D. Just wearing a skirt, right? Blue skirt. And then excited. She looks excited to see you, which is nice. Here we go. And then press Shift Enter to run that. There we go. Adds them just like that, right? So this is the same thing as before, right? This just shows you your tags that are on a thing, you know. Nothing too crazy. You can still drag and drop. You know, like if you want to, I'm not going to tag her with that, but you know, you can drag and drop stuff same as you used to do, right? If I want to lift this tag, I can do that. I can drag it back right there. Simple. Okay, something new about this area, right, is this options button. These are kind of related to how you tag things, right? So a new feature here is this toggle right here, tag selection. And then you'll see on our left-hand side something new happened, right? So now this lets us have kind of a hand-picked sub-selection of files in our selection, right? So we can, if we click in these boxes here, we can select some files here. Excuse me. So we can add these to our selection here. You know, you can add as many as you want. Doesn't really matter. If you scroll down to the bottom here and press this select button, it'll select everything that's in this current view, right? So it's important that this is in this current view. It doesn't select your entire selection, right? So if we scroll to the next page, none of these are selected. So we can select these and select them. So now we have the first and second pages and not the third, right? So it seems to me one thing I didn't do is that when you click the select button, it doesn't unselect them, right? So I guess if you don't want to do that, right, then you can just go over here and clear the tag selection and then undo that. I didn't even think about that. So it's not likely that that's going to get changed before Saturday. Right, okay, so what can you do with the selection? So the important thing that you can do with the selection is when you run a tag expression, that then not only gets applied to this image, but also to any image that's in your selection, right? And so it lets you just tag multiple things at a time. And I believe that if you, even if this current file, right, because this one here is this file, even if this current file isn't selected, I think that this tag might still run on this file, but we can try that. Let me find a good just nonsense tag here. We'll just add more to this. More? Yeah. So even if this file isn't selected, it's always a part of this selection, right? So just keep that in mind. You know, whatever you're currently looking at is always going to be affected by your tags. So now if we go here, we've got this more here. I should, like, you know, maybe be a little bit more careful about the images that I've got. I'm joking here. Whatever. Whatever. Okay, so then now here's another thing, right? Delete mode. This is new. This is brand new. This actually, well, it's actually not new. It's actually so old that I took it out and then added it back in. So way back in version 0.3, which doesn't even have a release tag on the website. You used to be able to have, there was a delete mode, and then I took it out in version 1, and then now I'm adding it back in even better than it was before because it's helpful. So delete mode will interpret any tag expression in here as an expression for deleting something, right? So here, if I want to just really be simple and just say, oh, well, I already tagged these 3 things with the more tag, and I want to get rid of that, and I can just do this, and then run that, and then you can see it's gone now. And if we scroll to the next one, it's gone, and we scroll to this one, it's gone. Quite simple, right? So very nice. And then also, one thing that's helpful here is I'm gonna not run the selection, but we can still run delete mode on just a single file. Is it'll follow any path that you give it, right? So what I mean by that is if I want to just say, oh, I have these 2 things that are blue, right? So if you just type in blue, then any tag on here that's blue, it'll delete, right? But what if I only want to delete the one that's attached to this ribbon bow? Then I can give it a path to that. So I can say here and then here. You don't have to do this formatting, by the way. I like to do it because I think it looks a little bit neater, but the query language is completely space agnostic for the most part. So not completely, but for the most part. Right, so this is saying delete this blue that you can find under this ribbon bow that you can find under Yui here. And then we run that, and then it deleted that, right? So here we have ribbon bow, but blue is gone, right? We can add that back in like this, do that, and then we can just drag and drop. Okay. And because previously, you know, how you would delete a tag is there's a, if I'm remembering this right, because it's been so long since I've used version 1, there's a delete zone kind of at the bottom, right? There's something like literally called delete zone or delete or something like that. I think it might just be called delete. And you would have to drag and drop, you know, tags one by one to it. And that is kind of laborious, right? So like if you wanted to, you know, on this one, you can just delete everything, right? If you just give it a wildcard, you just say, oh, I just want to retag this image entirely, then you can do that, you know. So I'll do that because it's not that big of a deal, right? Even though it kind of hurts. It kind of hurts to do that. Whatever. So you no longer have to drag and drop. You can use delete mode, which I think is very handy. But if you do want to just delete one tag at a time and you don't want to have to type it, all you got to do is just drag it to delete mode, right? And it gives you a nice outline to let you know, and then do that, and it deletes it, right? So the old way of doing it is still here. So that's nice. I'll just retag this later. I don't even care. And then here you can get rid of that. Okay. So that pretty much covers this side, right, which is handy. And then now down here, you saw me pull this up before. This is just a little, you know, panel. Here's just the same. This widget has not changed at all since the very, very, very beginning. So this is all the same, right? This should not be brand new or anything. One thing that is new about it, however, is the way that you add descriptors, right? So when you want to add descriptors, what you used to have to do is you would have like a space delimited list of your new descriptors, and then you add them, and then they all get added to unrelated at the same time, you know. So I'll just go ahead and delete these here. Do that. Now what you can do is you can specify this accepts an expression, actually. So this accepts a query language expression. So you can give it a path to something. So we can say that, oh, okay, under our meta tag, I'm going to make a, Yui's kind of in the way here, it's kind of hard to see. This resizes kind of erratically, so I'm going to make a zoomer tag, and then that, or I'm going to make a zoomer descriptor, you know, that's really the more appropriate term for it. I'm going to make a zoomer descriptor, and then under that, you know, we're going to have fun words like we're going to have glizzy, we're going to have no cap, we're going to have for real, we're going to have on God, we're going to have sheesh, you know. And you can do that, right? And then so this will give you a little, you know, descriptor hierarchy, and you can script that. So if we run that, we do this here. Now here's our zoomer descriptor. We go in here, and we got all those in here, right? So that's a really handy way to specify a hierarchy without having to manually drag and drop all of them, which can be, you know, if you're making like a new database, it can be kind of a pain to do that. So I thought that was really nice. I'm a big fan of that change. So let me delete here these zoomer ones, right? Get rid of all this. Okay. So those are all pretty much the new UI features. I think probably what I'll do is I'll make a separate video about the changes in the query language. Actually, I'll touch on the basic differences now, because there are a couple of basic changes in the syntax that are different now. So, and then I'll make a video about advanced usages, because there are some kind of exciting new, I don't know, kind of emergent properties that I'm actually really very excited about the query language. So I'll make a video kind of pontificating about those rather than waste your time in this one. So the new basic syntax for the query language, which has been renamed to YuiQL, Yui's query language, right? Is that we still have these same, I'm trying to think, tokens, prefixes, right? We got p dot, d dot, and r dot, right? And then in version 1, there was u dot, right? Where u dot was find untagged files. So in version 2, u dot is no more. There's only p dot, d dot, and r dot. And these all do the same thing that they used to. Right, so p dot specifies a pattern that corresponds to a file path, and then d dot corresponds to a descriptor, and then r dot corresponds to a descriptor, and then every descriptor that's in front of that one, right? So that's the same. Those are all the same. The way that if you don't specify a token, that this is still an implicit r dot, that's still the same. They're still case insensitive, so you can still do that. That's the same. The thing that's different is that when you wanted to use set operations like union and intersection and difference, previously what those would have been is this u pipe, I pipe, and d pipe. So that's how you did those, right? Those are gone. They've been replaced with, here, I'll put those back. They've been replaced with, respectively, pipe, ampersand, and exclamation or bang, I guess, if you want to call it that. So this is just to cut down a little bit on verbosity and maybe to, I don't know, make it a little bit more clear, right? So like this corresponds to an or, this corresponds to an and, this corresponds to a not, right? So it's a little bit simpler that way, a little bit nicer looking. And I think also a minor thing that I had mentioned in version 1, or rather what my intention was in version 1, is that these expressions, you know, if you have like A or B or C, is that these expressions were strongly left associative. That was my intention all the way back in version 1. That's still my intention now, but there was some kind of bug in the implementation, or I was just being stupid. Actually, I was being stupid, and it's not actually left associative in version 1, I'm pretty sure. So I think I don't quite know exactly how it evaluates in version 1. I don't quite recall. But just know that when I say that it's strongly left associative, that's actually true now. Right? So this becomes that, right? So of course, because we're still dealing with sets here, so union and intersection are still associative, right? So it doesn't actually matter, you know, if you only have unions, then, you know, this query and this query are the exact same. Those are going to evaluate to be the exact same, right? The thing that matters for is with differences, right? So if you have A, B, C, right, and these still have implicit intersections between them, so you can leave out that, and this is just an implicit intersection, and then do that, right? So now we have that. This is implied to be that, right? So this is the same as before, right? So it's left associative now. That's mostly for the sake of differences. So I think that was a bug in the previous one. I don't quite, yeah, you know, it just didn't work the way it was supposed to. Now it does, right? So you know, anytime you see an operator, it's strongly left associative, right? So anything to the left of it is treated as one term. So just remember that. Okay. You know, you can still use parentheses to group things, right? So you can still do something like this. You know, find A or B that's not D or E. You can still do that. That's fine. Those are all the basic differences, right? So those still work the same way. You can still do subtags. Those all work the same way that they used to. So if you're familiar with that, then nothing's changed with that. If you're not familiar with that, then you should go back and rewatch my tutorials, because I'm not going to explain that. That's kind of a fundamental idea of Tagger. I don't want to keep rehashing that. So I think I'll probably end this here because that's about it for this UI. So I might make I'm definitely going to make a separate video about some more advanced features of the query language. Um, and then I might make another shorter video about the command line operations, right? Because I didn't even talk about those, right? Um, you know what? I'm not going to bother, right? If you need to know, you can just run help. Like, you can read this. So I think that the help is probably clear enough. You can figure that out. So I think that'll be it for now. So if you're watching this, thanks for watching. Yep. Thank you. Bye bye.